You know, we all want these amazing results in our lives, right? But what if the secret isn't some huge, life-altering overhaul? What if it's all about a series of tiny, almost invisible improvements? Today, we're going to dive into atomic habits, a really powerful system for getting just 1% better every single day. And it all kicks off with a story about failure.
To really get a feel for how this works, let's start with a story. And it begins with this number, 100. I want you to just picture that for a second. A whole century of almost complete mediocrity for a national sporting organization.
I mean, for nearly 100 years, professional cyclists in Great Britain were, well, they were fine. But that's it, just fine. Since 1908, they had scraped together only a single gold medal at the Olympics. And in the biggest race of them all, the Tour de France, forget about it. In 110 years, not one British cyclist had ever won. Their performance was so underwhelming that one of the top bike manufacturers in Europe literally refused to sell bikes to the team. Ouch.
But then, in 2003, everything changed. They hired a new performance director, a guy named Dave Brailsford. And he came in with a really simple philosophy, the aggregation of marginal gains. The whole idea? Just break down everything you could possibly think of about riding a bike, and then improve each tiny component by just 1%. And the level of detail here was incredible. They were testing different massage gels, they hired a surgeon to teach riders the absolute best way to wash their hands to avoid colds, they even painted the inside of the team truck white just so they could spot tiny bits of dust that might affect the bikes. Wild, right?
And the results? Well, they came way faster than anyone could have possibly imagined. At the 2008 Beijing Olympics, the British team just dominated, winning an insane 60% of the gold medals available. Over the next decade, from 2007 to 2017, they won 178 world championships and 5 Tour de France titles. A whole century of being average was completely wiped out by this commitment to tiny, marginal gains.
This quote just perfectly illustrates the power of compounding, doesn't it? Small habits are exactly like that stonecutter's hammer. A single tap doesn't look like it's doing anything, but that consistent pressure just keeps building and building until, bam, a breakthrough happens. It wasn't the final 1% improvement that won the gold medal. It was the accumulation of all the tiny improvements that came before it. Okay, so the story of British cycling is super inspiring, but how do we actually apply this to our own lives? Well, the atomic habit system gives us a really simple framework for that exact thing, the 4 laws of behavior change. So let's break them down.
First up, we've got the first law, make it obvious. Now, here's a thought. What if the most powerful driver of your habits isn't actually your motivation, but it's just what's sitting right there in front of you? This law is all about the environmental cues that trigger our behaviors, a lot of the time without us even realizing it. So, our brain is basically a prediction machine. It's constantly scanning our environment, looking for clues on how to act next. And the most powerful cues by far are visual. So if you want to build a new habit, the simplest thing you can possibly do is just make the cue for that habit a really visible part of your environment.
Take this super simple example. The author wanted to eat more apples, but he kept them hidden away in the fridge crisper. Out of sight, out of mind. So by simply moving them into a big bowl right on the kitchen counter, he started eating apples every single day. See, it wasn't about willpower, it was just about making the habit obvious.
Okay, so we've made our cue visible. That's step 1. Next up, we need to leverage a really deep fundamental human need, our desire to belong. And that brings us right to the second law, make it attractive.
We are absolutely wired to imitate the habits of 3 groups in particular: the people close to us, the culture we're in, and the people we see as powerful or admirable. We pick up habits from our family and friends, we follow what's normal in our society, and we copy people we look up to. So the key takeaway is this: if you want to build a habit, make it attractive by joining a culture where that habit is already the normal behavior.
So just how powerful is this pull to conform? Well, let's look at a classic psychology experiment. Back in the 1950s, Solomon Asch showed people 2 cards. On one, there's a single line. On the other, there are 3 lines labeled A, B, and C. The task was simple. Just say which of the 3 lines matches the first one. I mean, it's obviously C, right? But here was the twist. The person being tested was in a room full of actors, and they were all instructed to give the same obviously wrong answer.
Before you know it, the real participant would start to doubt their own eyes. By the end of the experiment, almost 75% of the subjects had agreed with the group's incorrect answer at least once. We have this really powerful internal desire to fit in, and we can use that to our advantage by surrounding ourselves with people who already have the habits we want.
So our habit is now obvious and it's attractive, but if it's too difficult to do, we still won't do it. This brings us to the third law, which is all about the physics of human behavior. Make it easy.
Our brains are wired to conserve energy. That means we will always drift toward the path of least resistance. The secret to building a habit that actually lasts isn't about some heroic effort. It's about making the right thing to do, the easiest thing to do.
Consider this really cool experiment from a photography class at the University of Florida. The professor split his students into two groups. The quantity group was going to be graded purely on volume. Turn in 100 photos, you get an A. The quality group only had to produce one single photo, but it had to be almost perfect.
At the end of the semester, the professor was absolutely stunned. It turns out all the best photos were produced by the quantity group. Why? Well, because they weren't paralyzed by the idea of perfection. They were just out there taking action. They experimented, they learned from their mistakes, and they just got their reps in. They made it easy to start, and in doing so, they mastered the craft. It really is true. Perfection is the enemy of progress.
All right, we've made the habit obvious, attractive, and easy. But there's one more piece to this puzzle, and it's the one that really makes a habit stick for good. This is the fourth law: make it satisfying.
See, our brains evolved in what you could call an immediate return environment. We needed to find food, water, and shelter right now. So any behavior that produced an immediate reward was a behavior worth repeating. And that wiring is still there today. To make a habit stick, we have to find a way to give ourselves an immediate signal of success.
This is illustrated perfectly by something called the paperclip strategy. There was a young stockbroker who had to make 120 sales calls a day. To make this really daunting task feel satisfying, he put 2 jars on his desk and filled one with 120 paperclips. After every single call, he'd move one clip over to the other jar. This simple visual act of making progress gave him a little hit of satisfaction, making it that much easier to pick up the phone for the next call.
So there you have it. That's the complete system in a nutshell. It's not about one massive, monumental change. It's about building a system of tiny habits that all work together.
So let's just recap it one more time. For any habit you want to build, just ask yourself these 4 questions. How can I make it obvious? How can I make it attractive? How can I make it easy? And finally, how can I make it satisfying? This is basically your cheat sheet for engineering better habits.
So as we wrap all this up, I'll just leave you with this one question. Forget about the grand, sweeping goals for just a moment. What is the one tiny 1% improvement you can make today? Because as we've seen, it's those changes that, over time, deliver truly remarkable results.